There's something that happens at backyard feeders across America that most people never really stop to think about. You're standing at your kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the birds. And for a few minutes, everything feels peaceful. A northern cardinal perches on the edge of the feeder, red as a stoplight, perfectly still. He glances around, slow, deliberate, almost like he's taking inventory of everything before he commits to a single seed. And then, out of nowhere, a blue jay lands. The cardinal doesn't flinch, but something changes. The air changes. The other birds scatter. The blue jay spreads slightly, puffs up just enough, and cocks his head like he already owns the place. Here's what's interesting. Most people would call the blue jay the aggressor, the loud one, the bully of the backyard. But what if I told you the story is more complicated than that? What if both of these birds are aggressive, just in completely different ways? And what if understanding how they're different tells you something surprisingly fascinating about how wild animals actually compete for survival? Because here's the thing. One of these birds relies on presence, the other relies on performance. And once you know which is which, you will never watch your backyard feeder the same way again. Let's start with something honest. When people talk about aggressive backyard birds, the blue jay almost always comes up first. And that's not unfair. Blue jays are loud. They're bold. They have this particular way of arriving at a feeder, not quietly, not subtly, but with the full intention of being noticed. They scream. They flash those bold blue wings. They land like they have somewhere to be, and nobody had better get in the way. The northern cardinal, on the other hand, tends to draw a different kind of admiration. People describe cardinals as graceful, peaceful even. There's something about that deep red color against snow or against the bare branches of a winter morning that makes people reach for words like beautiful and calm. Some people even describe feeling something close to stillness when a cardinal appears. So we've got one bird that feels like a storm rolling in, and another that feels like a moment of quiet in the middle of a busy day. But here's what a lot of people miss. The cardinal is not passive, not even close. He just hides it better. And the blue jay? He's not just being aggressive for the sake of it. There's a strategy behind every single thing that bird does, and once you understand it, you stop seeing a bully and start seeing something genuinely brilliant. This is a story about two birds with wildly different personalities, competing for the same resources, using completely opposite approaches, and both of them are winning. Round 1. How they claim territory. Here's a question worth thinking about. How does a bird make clear that a space belongs to them? For the blue jay, the answer is simple: volume. A blue jay establishing territory is not a subtle event. He calls. He screams. He mimics other birds. More on that in a second. He physically positions himself in high, visible spots and makes absolutely sure every creature within hearing range knows he's there. His crest, those feathers on the top of his head, goes up when he's agitated or asserting dominance. It's a flag. It says, "I'm here, I'm serious, and I would prefer you leave before this becomes a problem." Blue jays will physically chase other birds away from feeders. They'll dive-bomb squirrels, harass hawks, and mob predators in groups. They are not intimidated by size. There are documented observations of blue jays confronting birds significantly larger than themselves. Not because they're reckless, but because they've calculated that aggression works. The northern cardinal takes a different road. Male cardinals sing, and they sing constantly during breeding season. That song is not just beautiful. It is a boundary marker. A territorial broadcast that says, "This area is occupied, and I will defend it." Two male cardinals will engage in extended singing contests, each trying to outsing the other before they ever come to physical confrontation. Often, they never need to. But if a rival male cardinal does get too close, the dynamic shifts fast. Male cardinals will chase hard, and fight physically if it comes to that. There's even a well-documented behavior where male cardinals will attack their own reflection in windows or mirrors, mistaking the image for a rival male, spending hours trying to drive away a competitor that doesn't exist. That's not calm. That's a bird so wired for territorial defense that he'll exhaust himself fighting a reflection. So think about what you're actually seeing. The blue jay performs his aggression out loud, in real time, for everyone to witness. The cardinal carries his aggression like a slow burn, Quiet most of the time, but absolutely relentless when provoked. Neither one is passive. They're just running two completely different systems. Round 2. Intelligence and memory. This is where things get genuinely fascinating. Blue jays are members of the corvid family, the same broad group that includes crows, ravens, and magpies. And the corvids are, by nearly every behavioral measure, among the most cognitively complex birds on Earth. Blue jays have a working memory that lets them track where they've cached food. They hide seeds and acorns across large areas and retrieve them later, sometimes weeks later. They can recognize individual human faces. They have been observed using objects as tools in captivity. They communicate complex information to other blue jays about the location and nature of threats. And here's one that tends to stop people cold. Blue jays can mimic the calls of red-tailed hawks and other raptors, not just as mimicry for its own sake, but as a functional behavior. When a blue jay makes a hawk call at a feeder, other birds scatter, and suddenly the food source is clear. Is that deception? Is it intentional? Researchers are careful about using words like intentional, but the behavior is real, it's consistent, and it works. The northern cardinal is not as cognitively flexible as the blue jay, as most species aren't, but cardinals are not simple animals. Male cardinals learn their songs during their first year of life and develop a repertoire of up to a dozen distinct song patterns. They use different calls for different situations: alarm calls, contact calls, aggressive calls, and songs specifically directed at attracting mates. Female cardinals also sing, which is relatively unusual in North American songbirds, and they often sing from the nest, possibly communicating with the male about food needs. Cardinals also demonstrate learning. They adapt quickly to new feeder designs. They observe other birds and adjust their own behavior based on what they see. They recognize consistent human presences and can become noticeably more comfortable around people who feed them regularly. But in terms of raw problem-solving ability, the blue jay is operating at a different level. Not better as a bird, just more cognitively versatile, more curious, more adaptable to new problems. If you were casting these two birds in a film, the blue jay would be the quick-thinking improviser who finds a solution in the moment. The cardinal would be the one who's mastered a specific skill so completely that he rarely needs to improvise at all. Round 3. Confidence around humans. This one is something you can actually test in your own backyard. Walk toward a blue jay sitting at a feeder. He'll watch you. He'll assess you. He may stay significantly longer than most birds before finally deciding to move. Blue jays, over time, tend to develop a kind of calculated tolerance for humans. Not affection, exactly, but a practical assessment that this particular large animal is not a threat. In areas where blue jays have lived around people for generations, they can become almost startlingly bold. They land on porches while people are sitting on them. They watch from close distances. And they remember. People who regularly provide peanuts for blue jays report that the birds begin to anticipate them, appearing when the person comes outside, even before the food is out. The northern cardinal's relationship with humans is different. Cardinals tend to be more cautious in general, quicker to flush from a feeder if someone moves inside the house or walks near a window. They don't approach as closely or as boldly. But in areas where cardinals have been around humans for a long time, they develop a real familiarity. They learn schedules. They recognize voices. There are well-documented accounts of cardinals becoming comfortable enough to take seeds from human hands, but it usually takes much longer and much more patience than it would with a blue jay. The blue jay reads humans as part of the environment to be navigated strategically. The cardinal reads humans as something that needs to be understood before it can be trusted. The difference in approach says a lot about their broader personalities. Round 4. At the feeder. What actually happens? Let's talk about what you'd actually see on a typical morning. Blue jays tend to dominate feeders by presence and intimidation. A blue jay arrives and most smaller birds clear out immediately, not because they've been physically threatened in that moment, but because the pattern has established itself over time. The other birds know what a blue jay landing means. They've learned it. It means the jay is going to take what he wants, and anyone who stays is making a gamble. Blue jays at feeders frequently cache food rather than eat it on sight. They stuff their throat pouches with multiple seeds or peanuts and carry them off to hide. They're not always eating, they're provisioning for the future. That behavior makes them look greedy or aggressive at feeders when they're actually engaged in a sophisticated survival strategy. The cardinal approaches feeders more selectively. Male cardinals, especially dominant males, will displace other cardinals, including females in some cases, from a prime feeding spot. That quiet, still-looking bird on the edge of the feeder, he's almost certainly watching the approach lines, keeping tabs on every other bird in his immediate area. If a rival male cardinal appears, the dynamic can shift quickly and visibly. Cardinals tend to prefer platform feeders and will often sit and eat in one spot for longer than blue jays do. They're less likely to dominate through arrival and departure cycles and more likely to establish and hold a specific position. What's interesting is how these two birds interact with each other specifically. Generally, blue jays dominate cardinals at feeders. Their size advantage and more aggressive posturing tends to win out in direct encounters. But cardinals don't simply leave, they wait, they watch. And when the jay is occupied or gone, the cardinal moves in, patient, precise, unhurried. It's almost like watching two different strategies for surviving the same world. Round 5. The emotional dimension. Why we see them differently. This part is worth being honest about because it says something interesting about us as much as about the birds. The way humans perceive these two species is remarkably consistent. Blue jays are described as aggressive, loud, bossy, even rude. Cardinals are described as spiritual, beautiful, mysterious, even comforting. Part of this is just aesthetics. The cardinal's red is warm. It's the color of something meaningful. Fire, blood, life. The blue jay's colors are striking but feel more angular, more demanding. Even visually, the jay looks like it's making a statement and the cardinal looks like it simply is. Part of it is sound. Blue jay vocalizations are sharp, harsh, insistent. They cut through background noise. A cardinal's song is clear and melodic and complex. It sounds like something a person might actually want to hear. When cardinals begin singing in early spring, long before most other birds are active, people notice it. They comment on it. The song carries something that feels, and this is purely a human interpretation, like hope, and part of it is behavior. We watch the blue jay take over a feeder and we call it aggression. We watch the cardinal hold his position quietly and we call it dignity. But by objective measures, both birds are competing aggressively for resources. We're just reading the method through a very human filter. That filter isn't wrong. The blue jay is more overtly aggressive in most direct encounters. The cardinal does tend to hold a kind of composed stillness that blue jays generally don't. But the story we tell about those behaviors is ours. The birds are just being birds, doing exactly what they need to do to survive and reproduce in a world full of competitors. Round 6. When the stakes are highest. One final comparison that I think changes how you look at both of these birds. How does each one respond when there's a real threat? A hawk? A cat? A predator anywhere near the nest? The blue jay's response is group-based and loud. Blue jays will mob predators, gathering in numbers, screaming, diving, harassing a hawk or an owl until it leaves. This behavior is so consistent and so loud that it actually serves other species too. When you hear blue jays screaming in that particular alarm pattern, every bird in the area that knows what it means reacts, taking cover, going silent, getting small. Blue jays function as an alert system for the entire backyard community. Their aggression in this context is genuinely community protective. The cardinal's response to predators is different. It involves going quiet, going still, using the environment. Cardinals retreat to dense cover. They don't mob predators the way blue jays do. Their defense strategy is concealment, not confrontation. But near the nest, near eggs, near nestlings, cardinals chain. Both male and female cardinals have been observed aggressively defending nests from predators much larger than themselves. The composed, quiet bird becomes something different when the stakes are absolute. And that, honestly, is the most honest summary of the difference between these two birds. The blue jay is always performing, always broadcasting, always making sure the world knows where he stands and what he's capable of. The cardinal keeps most of it inside until he doesn't have a choice. So, which one is more aggressive? Honestly, it depends on what you mean by aggressive. If you mean louder, bolder, more willing to make a scene. The blue jay, almost certainly. If you mean deeply territorial, internally wired for competition, slow to escalate but absolute when pushed, the cardinal has a case. What I think is actually more interesting than the answer to that question is what these two birds reveal about the different shapes that drive and determination can take in the natural world. One bird announces himself, the other simply arrives. One claims space by filling it with sound and presence. The other claims it by knowing it, learning it, making it his through long, patient observation. And both of them are, right now, in backyards all across America, eating at feeders, singing from high branches, watching from fences, doing exactly what they've done for thousands of years. The next time you're at your window with a cup of coffee and that cardinal lands, that perfectly still, deep red bird who seems almost too composed for this world, ask yourself, what is he actually watching? And if a blue jay shows up a moment later, raising his crest, scanning the yard like he's running a security sweep, ask yourself the same question. They're both in there. They're both tracking everything. They both know exactly what they're doing. They just have very different ways of letting you know it.